Now, please join me in welcoming our Master of Ceremonies, Ambassador Eric Rubin, President of the American Foreign Service Association.
We're going to be honoring some of the best of our Foreign Service today, and I think the importance when we do that, not just doing it in person, because we've done it on Zoom for 2 years, but the importance in recognizing people who have not just been part of our community, of our service, of our Foreign Service family, but who've really shown commitment, patriotism, and excellence, and in some cases, real courage in the face of adversity. So it is really a joyful moment to be able to be here to recognize those accomplishments. And I'd like to start out by recognizing the accomplishments of this year's honoree for AFSA's Lifetime Contributions to American Diplomacy Award, Ambassador Ann Patterson, who's with us. And I want to thank Ann for joining us and congratulate her on this, and we will be talking more about that, but we're deeply honored that she could join us. We also have some former recipients in previous years, some of whom we were not able to honor in person. We'll be doing a separate event at Decor to honor the previous year's awardees, including last year's Lifetime Career Achievement honoree, Ambassador John Negroponte, former Deputy Secretary of State, and others who are here today who are former Lifetime Achievement Award winners, Ambassadors Tom Boyett, Ron Newman, Ruth Davis. And we're also honoring Ambassador Ed Perkins posthumously, and will be joined by his family in recognizing his Lifetime Achievement Award 2 years ago, which again, sadly, we could not do in person. We also will be presenting awards today for constructive dissent, for exemplary performance, and a new award honoring Foreign Service champions, people from outside the Foreign Service who go to bat for us, who support us on Capitol Hill and elsewhere. But let me just mention a few of our previous award recipients who were not able to be here due to COVID in the past. One of them is Kevin Murakami, who received AFSA's 2022 Strategic Writing Award, which is awarded to Foreign Service members whose final paper at the National Defense University was chosen as the best essay on strategy or policy. He's not able to join us today, but we want to mention his tremendous accomplishment. We're also honoring 9 winners of our Sinclair Language Awards, given to those who excel in the study or use of a Category 3 or 4 language at FSI, and we're congratulating them as well. And to mention again, last year's Lifetime Career Achievement Award recipient, whom we could not recognize in person, was former Deputy Secretary John Negroponte. He did so many things in addition to being Deputy Secretary of State, National Intelligence Director, U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Ambassador to 4 countries, including Iraq. He devoted more than 60 years of service to our country and the cause of diplomacy. I have been in his office in the past, and I can testify that his Foreign Service Commission was signed by President Eisenhower. So that's really something. So I just want to say we will be honoring him separately, but I want to salute him and thank Ambassador Negroponte and his wife Diana for their untiring efforts on behalf of our country. And then I very importantly want to thank all the sponsors of today's awards, the Nelson B. Delavan Foundation, Clements Worldwide, the Rifkin family, the Bolin family, the Global Community Liaison Office, and the Palmer family. Thank you for your generosity and support now and over the years. And with that, I think we should get started. So our first award is the Lifetime Career Achievement Award for contributions to American diplomacy. It is a great privilege and honor to award this to Ambassador Ann Patterson. Ambassador Patterson was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and received her bachelor's degree from Wellesley College in 1971. Before going to graduate school at the University of North Carolina, she joined the Foreign Service in 1973, is married to David Patterson, a retired Foreign Service officer, and she held an amazing array of posts in Washington abroad until she retired 5 years ago after over 40 years of service to our country. Early in her career, she served in Ecuador, and Saudi Arabia. She was one of the first women to serve at our embassy in Riyadh. She was political counselor at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations in Geneva, director for Andean Affairs, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Central America and the Caribbean, and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Inter-American Affairs. But things really picked up in 1997 when she returned to Latin America, serving as ambassador first to El Salvador and then to Colombia. She was Deputy Inspector General, Deputy Permanent Representative of the United Nations in New York, and Acting Permanent Representative in New York. Assistant Secretary of State for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, where I had the honor and privilege of working for her. And then she returned overseas again to serve as ambassador to Pakistan and ambassador to Egypt, and finally as Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern and North African Affairs at the Department of State from 2013 to 2017. During her illustrious Foreign Service career, Ambassador Patterson received numerous awards. The highest award that can be conferred by the Secretary of State, the State Department's Secretary's Distinguished Service Award, not once but twice. In 1977 and 1983, she received the Department of State's Meritorious Honor Award. In 1981 and 1988, she was the recipient of Superior Honor Awards. In 93, Presidential Honor Award, and in 2011, she was named one of Foreign Policy Magazine's 100 Top Global Thinkers. After retiring from the Foreign Service, Ambassador Patterson was appointed to the Commission on National Defense Strategy in 2017, to the Syria Study Group in 2019. She's taught at Yale's Jackson Institute, which has just become a School of International Affairs at Yale. She's an active member of the Academy of American Diplomacy and serves as a trustee of the Una Chapman Cox Foundation. And she is one of our guiding lights and also one of the most wonderful people all of us have ever had the pleasure of working with. So, Anne, congratulations on your tremendous career, your wonderful achievements. Thank you for your mentorship, your friendship, your support, your dedication. And if I may, I'd like to invite you to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm honored to receive this award, and I'm grateful to you and the board and to the members of AFSA. I'm pleased to say I've been a member of AFSA for 40 years. So first I was thinking about talking about the challenges of the Foreign Service, but I figured there's never going to be another opportunity to talk about the privilege of working with so many people in this room and so many others who are not here. When I think back about the many tours I had, what first comes to mind is the day-to-day interactions with great bosses, peers, and subordinates. And it was not just colleagues from state, but from other government agencies, the military, and many outstanding political appointees. I joined the Foreign Service in 1973, the year the policy of forcing women to resign when they married was abolished. My first post was Guayaquil, Ecuador, but I soon transferred to Quito, and my bosses there, Ed Cohen and Don Hart, spent a lot of time with me improving my writing. Ambassador Dick Bloomfield insisted that I return to Washington after my first post, a message I have always repeated to officers who worked for me overseas, and he helped me find a job. I worked in EB and INR. But my most valuable job, perhaps ever, was as Nicaraguan desk officer in 1979, probably the most consequential single year of the past 60, with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the Iranian Revolution. In Latin America, leftist guerrillas took over in Nicaragua, and violent civil wars ensued in El Salvador and Guatemala. The policy of engaging Nicaragua's new leftist government was very controversial. It was enormously instructive to trail around after Ambassador Larry Pizzullo, who worked the Hill seeking a supplemental, and I saw early on how important it was to develop relations with members of Congress. It was also my first exposure to how bitter and personal policy differences could become, as I saw more senior colleagues unceremoniously evicted from their offices when the administration changed. Since my husband David had been the Saudi desk officer, we took Arabic and went to Saudi Arabia for the next 4 years. The embassy had a great DCM and ambassador. DCM Ned Walker taught me not to bother him for guidance all the time. Trust your instincts, he said, and he helped me improve as a manager. As a reward for 4 years in Saudi Arabia, we went to Geneva, where we worked for the former president of Brandeis, Morris Abram, who taught us to look at issues from a different perspective. Later on, I worked for John Negroponte and Senator Jack Danforth at the U.S. mission to the UN and saw how much they had to offer us in our institution. The big advance for women came with the Baker administration, although people say it was really Larry Eagleburger who made the actual decision. Allegedly, Eagleburger asked for a list of proposed DASs, and there was only one woman out of 40, Tessie Schaefer. So Baker instituted a rule that every bureau should have a female DAS. Not only did women then receive positions, which they had been denied in the past, but there were now enough women in enough different jobs that it was clear that women could do any job in the department. So after working in WHA as a DAS, I went off to be ambassador to El Salvador. WHA is full of people, William Duncan, Bruce Williamson, Phil Chicola, who would always watch out for me and each other and tell us when we needed to adjust. In El Salvador, you could see the immigration problems which now plague both our countries: gangs, deportations, drugs, and all the social pathologies left over after the war. Later in Colombia, I saw what outstanding American leadership could look like in the implementation of Plan Colombia, which turned Colombia from a failing state into a thriving democracy. The clear and forceful leadership of Tom Pickering and Barry McCaffrey and the assistant secretaries like Pete Romero, who worked amiably together, were absolutely unique in my career. Pickering and McCaffrey would not tolerate interagency disputes, so there were not any. The Colombia experience has much to teach us, particularly in contrast to what happened later in Iraq and Afghanistan, but I doubt it could be replicated today because of the fragmentation in our country. In 2007, I went to Pakistan unexpectedly, literally pulled out of INL in a few days. I knew nothing about South Asia, but I was blessed to have two DCMs, Peter Bodie and Jerry Firestein, who knew the region. Soon after I arrived, Newsweek had a cover with a picture of extremists with raised fists describing Pakistan as the most dangerous country on earth. It was the height of the war on terror, and by 2010, the U.S. had 130,000 troops across the border in Afghanistan. What comes to mind most quickly is the bravery of our employees there. Candace Putnam watching a truck bomb circle her residence in Peshawar with her staff inside, Lynn Tracy's car being attacked by the Taliban as they tried to kidnap her, Mary Beth Goodman climbing up burning stairs after the Marriott was bombed to rescue people, or when Jerry Firestein halted a drone strike on the wrong target because he alone in the room recognized who was there because of his 3 tours in Pakistan. In my final tours in India and Egypt, I was surrounded by colleagues who had served for years in the most dangerous and physically difficult part of the world. There was no region of the world where expertise and experience mattered more and where the demands on our personnel were greater. I do want to say a few words about my family. My husband David loved the Foreign Service, and I could not have done anything without him. My stepdaughter Jessica is now in Namibia, soon to go to Sudan. 11-year-old Andrew used to watch the applicants lining up for visas at night in El Salvador, and it made a lasting impression on him. He now works as an attorney for an NGO that helps immigrants. My son Edward is here today, and he's married to Melissa Farrar, and many of you know her parents, Jonathan and Terry. As everyone here knows, it was a great privilege to represent the United States overseas, but it was also exciting, intellectually challenging, and fun to be surrounded by so many interesting and dedicated people. So thank you again, Eric, and thank AFSA. I'm honored to accept. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to introduce a first-time award that we haven't done before, and we're calling it our Foreign Service Champions Award. The award aims to recognize the accomplishments and achievements of a member of Congress, the military, or another influential non-career member of the foreign affairs community who has made meaningful contributions to diplomacy and the Foreign Service. Let me introduce this year's winners. They are Senator Dan Sullivan and Representative Joaquin Castro. Neither one of them is able to be with us today, but we will have a quick video introduction in a minute. Let me just say a few words about our two award recipients. Senator Sullivan became Alaska's 8th senator in 2015, but prior to embarking on a career in politics, he had an impressive record of military and national security service. He spent much of his career in the Middle East, Central Asia, and the Horn of Africa. He currently holds the rank of colonel in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. Following his retirement from active duty, Senator Sullivan served as the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Economic, Energy, and Business under the Bush administration. He's also served as director in the International Economics Directorate of the NSC at the White House. And he, along with Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, our other Senate Foreign Service Caucus co-chair, co-leads the Foreign Service Families Act effort in the Senate. Congressman Joaquin Castro has represented Texas's 20th Congressional District in the House since 2013. He's a longtime member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, currently serves as chair of the International Development, International Organizations, and Global Corporate Social Impact Subcommittee. That's a mouthful. Before becoming a United States representative, he represented the 125th District in the Texas House of Representatives, where he was vice chair of the Higher Education Committee and a member of the Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence Committees. He also previously served on multiple other committees, and he was a lead co-sponsor of our Foreign Service Families Act in the House. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, they're not able to be here, but we do have short video messages, starting with Senator Sullivan and followed immediately after by Congressman Castro. So I'll direct your attention to the screens.
Greetings, everybody, from the great state of Alaska. Sorry, I'm a little bit informal here. I'm in my office in Anchorage. Just got back from a trip out in our rural part of our state over the last several days. But I want to begin by expressing my great appreciation for this award. I'm very honored to receive it. Ambassador Rubin, thank you very much to all the fellow awardees and recipients. Congratulations to all of you. And I just want to really center my remarks on thanking everybody in the Foreign Service. You know, I think a number of you know I served as an Assistant Secretary of State in charge of the EB Bureau, what we called the Economic, Energy, and Business Affairs Bureau back in the day under Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and President George W. Bush. And I saw in that job that I had, which was, by the way, a great job, and I was very honored to be able to serve at the State Department, the incredible work that our Foreign Service and Civil Service officers do. Day in, day out, you're the front lines of people's interaction all around the world as it relates to our country, and I think you all do an exceptional job, which is one of the reasons in the U.S. Senate I've been very focused on trying to champion all the work that you do. First, by actually starting the Foreign Service Officers Caucus with Senator Chris Van Hollen as a caucus in the Senate that really enables all of you to come to us, get us members of the Senate to understand the Foreign Service officers and their needs, especially those of not just themselves but their families. And we've been glad to have the caucus working so well. And what we're doing is trying to provide a forum, not a hearing, which can be a little stressful, but a forum to come up to the Hill in an informal way and have a good discussion. That's been the purpose, and to support all of you, and then to listen. You know, one of the things that has come out of this is Senator Van Hollen and I last year introduced the Foreign Service Families Act, and we were proud to actually get that over the goal line last year at the end of the year. A really important piece of legislation that we heard from all of you, you thought you needed. We agreed that in many ways provides parity in terms of employment, educational benefits, the ability to not worry about your families when you're deploying, in a way on parallel with our wonderful U.S. military members. So we're glad to get that over the goal line, and I am very, very honored again to receive this award. Know that you got a strong champion for the Foreign Service in the U.S. Senate. Thanks again for all the great work you're doing, and I look forward to our continued work together. Thanks again.
Hi everyone, I'm Congressman Joaquin Castro and I represent the great city of San Antonio, Texas, my hometown, in the U.S. House of Representatives. I want to thank the American Foreign Service Association for putting together this event to celebrate the contributions of America's diplomats and foreign service professionals. I'm deeply honored to receive the 2022 Foreign Service Champion Award and to be recognized alongside Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska and the devoted public servants in this room. American diplomats and foreign service professionals are essential to our nation's security and prosperity. To strengthen our position on the global stage, we must continue to recruit and maintain a world-class diplomatic corps. This starts with building a representative workforce that reflects the diversity and strength of our citizenry. When we empower aspiring leaders of all backgrounds to pursue careers in foreign service, they will in turn help us meet complex global challenges. As chair of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on International Development, International Organizations, and Global Corporate Social Impact, I'm committed to strengthening our infrastructure for diplomacy. And for years, I've worked in Congress to do just that. This has meant establishing paid internship programs for young people interested in a career of service, protecting employees from discrimination, and ensuring State Department personnel and their families are taken care of at home and abroad. We secured funding for paid internships at the State Department, got protection for diplomats with disabilities, and passed the Foreign Service Families Act, bipartisan legislation I worked to pass with my fellow honoree, Senator Sullivan. In consultation with experts from the State Department and across our Foreign Service Corps, I remain focused on foreign policy that defends our core values and is centered on the perspectives and needs of communities that have experienced disproportionate harm, including women and girls, the LGBTQ+ community, and ethnic and racial minorities. The foundation for our infrastructure for diplomacy is the foreign service community and the public servants at the State Department, USAID, and across the federal government. I'm proud to champion the Foreign Service in Congress and work to bring greater recognition to the critical role that leaders like you have in our foreign policy. Thank you so much, and I look forward to working with all of you to bring the diplomatic service to new heights.
I want to congratulate Senator Sullivan and Congressman Castro again and thank them for all their support. It is fair to say that the Foreign Service Families Act would not have passed without the support of their caucuses. I did want to recognize in person former Deputy Secretary Negroponte. Thank you very much for joining us. And also the Director General of the Foreign Service, Ambassador Marcia Bernacat. Thank you for coming. We're honored by your presence. And now, I also have the privilege of introducing the Award for Exemplary Performance, which allows us to honor colleagues for going beyond their duties and responsibilities for the betterment of our work environment, relations with host countries, and U.S. foreign policy. And the first performance award is the Avis Bolin Award for eligible family members. And it is my privilege to introduce Ambassador Avis Bolin, my dear friend and predecessor as ambassador to Bulgaria, to introduce and award this award that's named for her late mother. So, Avis.
Thank you, Eric. It's really a great privilege to be here again after 3 years, is it? To once again present the Avis Bolin Award, which was established by the late Pamela Harriman in memory of my mother, the wife of diplomat Charles Bolin, to give recognition to the work done by the family members of those serving in U.S. embassies overseas. Their contributions are so important to the life of a mission, as we all know, and they are so often overlooked. The award honors a family member whose activities and relations with the American and foreign communities at post have done the most to advance U.S. interests. It seeks especially to give priority to those whose activities have had a meaningful impact on a community or institution in their host country. Today, we honor an outstanding awardee, Virginia Carlson, the spouse of a Foreign Service officer serving in Kingston, Jamaica. Her hard work during the pandemic in pulling together multiple events for teenagers, from swimming events to barbecues to Halloween parties, were a boon not only for the teenagers, but also, I imagine, for their parents. But today we honor especially her assistance to the work of under-resourced Jamaican organizations through the organization of a book drive in the embassy, based in the embassy and expat communities. As a result of her efforts, over 1,000 books were collected. 500 of them were distributed through the Peace Corps to Jamaican schools, while another 5,000, together with a significant number of DVDs, were donated to the Jamaica Library Service. This is the kind of achievement that creates goodwill for the U.S. in the local community and is very much in the spirit of the Avis Boland Award. As Virginia was not able to be here to receive the award in person, her colleague, Patricia Lindemann, will accept it on her behalf. Patricia, would you come forward?
I guess we got a thumbs
All
up.
right. Here you
I
are.
have Ginny's remarks, if that's okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Boland, for the introduction to this award established in honor of your mother's outstanding contributions. I served with Ginny Carlson and her family in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, where Ginny was a tireless community builder and an advocate for every single member of our consulate community. She was also a highly impactful volunteer at that post, with book donations, among other causes. I am honored to read her remarks to you today. It is with honor and a little surprise that I accept this award for my own small efforts and on behalf of all the EFMs who work unsung and unseen in our embassy and consulate communities every day to make life a little better, a little easier, or a little less lonely. Living overseas away from family support is hard. The efforts I made to reach out to the U.S. Embassy community and make connections to fellow EFMs by creating spaces for teenage and adult EFMs to meet and socialize was important. As I have personally found life at post challenging and isolating many times, I recognized that many others also faced the same challenges, even more so throughout the COVID pandemic, when many were just emotionally exhausted. Further, this award recognizes my efforts toward giving back to the local community in a way that is unique to me, and considering that we were still in the grip of the COVID pandemic, a seemingly impossible challenge. Organizing the book drive to collect books and distribute them to underserved communities and populations was my way of saying thank you to the host nation of Jamaica. Books have always been a way of escape for me from the stresses of everyday life and a valuable learning resource. When people lack access to books, their opportunities are diminished. I have many ideas to help others, but to find the energy and determination to carry through from idea to planning to action has meant I had to dig deep into that resolve that makes me and many EFMs who we are. We are tough and resilient and amazing in our unique ways, and we are often not seen. As unpaid members of the U.S. mission overseas, countless family members perform countless acts of kindness each day, forging connections within and beyond our small communities. Burdens shared are burdens halved, while burdens borne alone take a heavy toll on our families. We need to do more to make life overseas more navigable and easier to bear for the next generation of Foreign Service employees and families from better EFM employment opportunities, continuity of employment opportunities from post to post, to more social connection and networking for all groups, those working and non-working, children and adults, those with access to a safe transport option, and those who don't have access. We are stronger together than we can ever be alone, and this award recognizes that we are here for the journey as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next award is the Nelson B. Delavan Award for Exemplary Performance by an Office Management Specialist. I'd like to welcome Mark Harrop to the stage to present this year's award winner, and in doing so, to say how grateful we are to the Harrop and Delavan families for their support of AFSA and the Foreign Service over many, many decades, and also to say how grateful we are to Ambassador Bill Harrop and to his late wife, Anne, and to express our condolences on her recent passing. So with that, let me welcome Mark to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the second time that I have had the honor and pleasure of presenting the annual Nelson B. Delavan Award for exemplary performance to a deserving Foreign Service Office Management Specialist. I was last down here in Washington, D.C. to bestow this AFSA Award in 2015 to an OMS who had made a notable contribution to post and morale beyond the scope of her job responsibilities. That year, I filled in, as I am now, for my father, Ambassador William C. Harrop, past AFSA president, since he was called to the podium at that ceremony to be the recipient of AFSA's Lifetime Contributions to American Diplomacy Award, making us all very proud. Fast forward 7 years to the present, when my dad has opted for health reasons to transfer to me the presentation of our Delavan Foundation's AFSA-related award. A quick word on the Nelson B. Delavan Foundation. Named for my maternal grandfather, a self-made entrepreneur who began a machine tool business in his upstate New York basement after serving in the U.S. Army during World War I, and then studying engineering. Over the next several decades, his vision evolved into a global enterprise, Delavan Manufacturing Company, based in Des Moines, Iowa. DMC specialized in high-precision nozzles for agricultural spraying equipment, oil burners, and notably special components for jet plane engines during and well after World War II. Following his death in 1971 and the company's sale a decade later, my grandmother created the Nelson B. Delavan Foundation as a nonprofit trust in 1984, which donates funds to institutions such as the Humane Rescue Alliance that support animal welfare, a cause that my late mother, Anne Delavan Harrop, embraced, as well as cultural, historical, and educational centers, and of course, importantly for this occasion, professional diplomacy and foreign policy. Which brings us back to today's 2022 Delavan Exemplary Performance Award for an Office Management Specialist, whose extraordinary contributions to morale and effectiveness at post go beyond the scope of his or her job responsibilities. This year's recipient is Dennis Rajic, stationed in our consulate in Shanghai, who, in his capacity as Executive Assistant to the Consul General, displayed impressive organizational skills, problem-solving, and initiative to ensure the well-being of American and local staff during Shanghai's largest COVID outbreak since the pandemic began. Though eligible for evacuation as a, quote, non-emergency staffer, unquote, Mr. Rajic volunteered to stay behind to ensure the orderly flow of activities during the height of the pandemic, such as advocating tirelessly for critical trash removal at housing compounds and the consulate, helping retrieve critical files for Americans' safe return to the United States, and ensuring that funds were raised to provide crucial care packages for local staff and their families. You can find more information about Dennis and his achievements in your programs today. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances well beyond his control, Dennis Rajic could not get clearance enabling him to leave China and attend this ceremony. However, Tiffany Henderson is here to accept Dennis's 2022 Nelson B. Delafin AFSA OMS Exemplary Performance Award on his behalf. Please welcome Tiffany to the podium, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Dennis.
Thank you.
To you on his behalf.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to stand in for my colleague, Dennis, who I happen to have had the distinct privilege to work with when we were both stationed in Kabul at the same time. When he was announced that he won this award, I was not surprised. But this year has been his year. He not only received this distinguished Delafin Award, but he is also the recipient of the SOSA Award and OMS of the Year. So that tells you how wonderful this particular colleague is. And it speaks absolutely to who he is as a person and as an employee. So again, I stand here honored to stand in for him. So I will read his remarks as best as I can. So greetings. I was hoping to be here among all these great folks, but China and Dynamic Zero had other plans. I would like to thank AFSA for the recognition and the great men and women of Mission China who made this a possibility. In March, April, Shanghai went into what was supposed to be a 4 to 5 day lockdown. 60-odd days later, we came out of one of the longest lockdowns of a metropolitan area in mainland China. The unprecedented lockdown and the accompanying collapse of the vital supply chains created the foundations for the acute needs across our mission. I am glad that with the help of my colleagues within Mission China and Shanghai, we were able to step up and do what was necessary for our people, both direct hires and locally engaged staff. I am grateful that I had the opportunity to do what was necessary, but I also recognize that all of this could not have been done without the vital links that ensured that we all work together. These links stem from the leaderships of Ambassador Burns and DCM Meal in Beijing, and CG Heller and DPO Delk, in Shanghai. By creating the opportunities and groundworks, they ensured we could lead on the issues that had a great impact on our mission. There are a great number of untold stories from the lockdown that I will carry with me through my career in the Foreign Service. Some of them truly enforced the pride I feel for our work overseas. One of the aspects of the nomination narrative talked about me donning full PPE and heading to the airport to retrieve our diplomatic pouch, navigating checkpoints and a city under virtual police and medical shutdown. The pouch contained vital documents, including passports. The untold story, the heroic story in my mind, was the actions of Consular Chief Garote and ACS Chief Cavallo in the finest traditions of the Foreign Service, ensured getting passports to American citizens wishing to get themselves out of a city under full lockdown. To me, this truly exemplified dedication to service and our commitment to ensure support to American citizens overseas, fulfilling the first mandate of our Foreign Service role. These stories and many more inspired me to look at this recognition as not only an individual recognition from our great colleagues in AFSA, but a recognition for all of Mission China. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it is my privilege to welcome John Clements to the stage to present the M. Juanita Guest Award for exemplary performance by a community liaison officer. And let me just take the opportunity to thank the Clements family and John for everything they've done for the Foreign Service over so many decades. And a personal note for John's personal efforts this past year after the evacuation of our people from Embassy Kiev to support our colleagues there under very difficult circumstances. So thank you, John, and welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Just a few words about Christine. I had the privilege of meeting her today, and right off the bat, you understand excellence. I mean, her abilities, her clarity, her understanding, and her sweetness is something you don't come across very often. So it was just a delightful conversation. And just a few words. During Embassy Kabul's historic and rapid closure, Christine Peterson's performance as community liaison officer was key. She displayed selfless dedication and support for U.S. and Afghan staff, support to exiting USG personnel, ensured the morale of thousands of LE staff and their family members, as well as USG families. Additionally, Christy managed the anxiety affecting the staff after prolonged COVID-19 restrictions, with only remote CLO programs until most Americans were vaccinated. Christy remained as CLO in the U.S., linking management, Afghan staff, and those on OD, working across time zones and on varying levels of issues with minimal guidance as her own leadership evacuated. This exceptional dedication in extremely trying circumstances demonstrates an extraordinary level of service that directly impacted thousands of lives. Christine, congratulations.
Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon. I'm losing track. So I'd like to start by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Clements and Clements Worldwide and AFSA, as well as to Ben Dill and Patrick Merrill for taking the time and the effort to nominate me for this award. And also a giant thank you to Embassy Canberra, who their love and support in getting me here today. I am humbled by this recognition and keenly aware of the honor, especially with so many extraordinary CLOs that serve in our embassies and consulates worldwide. Our Kabul community was one of a kind, and I am honored to have had the opportunity to have been such an active part of it for its final year. As we navigated the twin stressors of the pandemic and the security situation outside our walls, we had to get increasingly creative in finding social and mental outlets to help alleviate the pressures that we felt living in a small compound every day. When we couldn't gather socially, we decorated for our grab-and-goes. We made them festive and special. Community ideas like our Little Field Garden and themed 5Ks created a tighter bond and a sense of home, even as we had to be socially distant. We had fun devising new ways to play bingo and trivia nights. We laughed together, we raged together, We grew closer through our adversities and with a hearty helping of chocolate from our Clo candy bowl, which I kept very stocked. When my co-Clo Lily left in April, I felt the loss of her acutely. Our Kabul family was remarkable. During the evacuation, I was inspired as Kabul came together and supported our Afghan LE staff and each other through our endless days and our sleepless nights. And the situation escalated so quickly, but Kabul saw the challenges and faced them head on. Security contractors and our Gurkha Guard force worked side by side with our military. They stood up and accounted for and protected everyone during the embassy evacuation. Our RSO and consular teams stayed behind at the airport and shifted immediately from evacuating the Americans to evacuating their Afghans. On arrival in Doha, our management team instantly transitioned out of evacuee status and began manifesting flights to the US, working night and day to get the Americans and Afghan evacuees home. Sorry. We all then stood up our Kabul West here in DC, and we kept right on working. GCLO was an incredible source of love and support, not just for our community, but for me personally. Our Department of State and our USAID friends and colleagues poured into DC and Doha and Kabul, our lily pads and our safe havens, to serve on the many task forces in every capacity. I was not the only person working 15 to 20 plus hour days. I am honored and humbled to have been able to support them all however I could. The dedication to duty and life continues to inspire me to this day. My heart still aches when I think of our departure and the loss of that incredible community, and a huge thank you to each and every one of you. Please indulge me. I want to share one experience that just kind of gives a little bit more about our Kabul family and everything that we did for each other. On the day of the bombing at the airport, I was working with our Kabul West team here in Maine State. We watched in horror as the reports about the bombing started pouring in. The rumors of additional bombings and the death of our young military devastated us. And at that moment, we had buses full of LE staff heading for the airport through multiple Taliban checkpoints. After the bombing, the buses were stopped, and they left sitting on the side of the busy road, and our LES were terribly exposed and vulnerable. We continued working through tears when one of our LE staff frantically called me. He and a few others had been pulled off one of the buses and were being threatened with arrest by the Taliban at gunpoint. I immediately contacted our RSO team at the airport with the details of why they had been pulled off, and the military and the RSO were able to resolve the issue with the Taliban before any harm came to our staff. Sadly, due to the turmoil at the airport, after hours on the side of the road, all the buses were turned around, and our dejected and terrified staff were sent to their homes. Our RSO team at the airport worked feverishly to get the buses going again, and our relief back here in DC was palpable as we finally started receiving notifications that our LE staff had made it into the airport. I am so proud of everything that we all accomplished, and I'm still heartsick for everything that we did not. I loved being Clo in Kabul, and I could not have asked for better people to serve and to advocate for. I am especially grateful for the support of my husband, David. He carried me through the evacuation. Once he arrived from Kabul, he made sure I ate, he made sure I slept. He volunteered beside me at the Dulles airport as we welcomed home our LE staff and others. He held me when I was crying. He held me as I cried, exhausted, frustrated, and angry tears, and he never let me lose hope. He showed up when I needed him most, and I will never forget his love and support. Thank you again for this wonderful recognition of everything that we all accomplished.
Thank you, Christine, for that very moving and meaningful, those remarks. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure of honoring the recipient of our award for achievement and contributions to AFSA, which recognizes an active duty or retired AFSA member of any of the foreign affairs agencies represented by AFSA who has made a significant non-monetary contribution to the association. This year's winner is Susan Johnson. Ms. Johnson was the first woman to be elected to serve as AFSA president, and she currently serves as president of the Association for Diplomatic Studies and Training. During her time as AFSA president, she worked to elevate the profile and importance of professionalism and ethics. She helped lay the groundwork for the upcoming celebration of the 1924 centennial of both the Foreign Service and AFSA. She ensured that AFSA successfully won back pay and retroactive bonuses for diplomatic security agents who had been denied them. And she strived to achieve better policies regarding our pets, which is a very important subject for so many of us in the Foreign Service. Lastly, Ms. Johnson worked to modernize AFSA and demonstrated a unique engagement with the association's retired constituency. Her leadership has had lasting positive effects not only on AFSA, but on the entire Foreign Service. So it is a great pleasure to present this award to Susan Johnson, my predecessor. Susan, congratulations. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. Gillis. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, and thank everyone here, including especially my fellow awardees who recount these moving stories which remind all of us why the Foreign Service is such a special life and work and experience, and reminds me that the first thing I think about in connection with myself is the Foreign Service and being a Foreign Service officer. I'm honored really to receive this award, but mostly to consider all you and to be a colleague to all of you here and all of you around the world. So I have to start my remarks by thanking, even in absentia, the hundreds, perhaps thousands of fellow Foreign Service members from all agencies who've supported and participated directly or indirectly in AFSA since it was formed in 1924, whether as post representatives or as through service on the AFSA board or on AFSA committees or on AFSA staff or even participating and voting in AFSA elections, and thereby supported the Foreign Service as a service and professional cadre. I'd also like to express gratitude today to the many dedicated AFSA staff members over these same decades who've done so much to strengthen AFSA's work in support of the Foreign Service. Their individual and collective contributions is an inspiration. And today is an opportunity to express my thanks to all of them here and sort of be on record. My life has been intertwined with the Foreign Service, like many lives here, growing up in it in the 1950s and 60s in Eastern Europe, North Africa, and East Africa, later becoming an FSO myself. So perhaps my commitment to the Foreign Service and my love for it as a unique, rich, wonderful life and work opportunity, its challenges and sacrifices notwithstanding, is no surprise. I've experienced the Foreign Service and diplomacy from multiple angles, as a family member, as a Foreign Service officer, as the spouse of a foreign diplomat, as an insider on the outside through many leave without pay assignments or times, during which I continued to work in the foreign affairs sector and in support of State Department goals. This has contributed to a broader and deeper perspective, and I know it's deepened my appreciation for the value of a professional career diplomatic service. This appreciation, along with strong encouragement from our dear departed colleagues, Bill Farrand and Tex Harris, motivated me to run for the position of AFSA president in 2009. It was an honor to serve in that capacity, and I was surprised to learn after being elected that I was the first woman elected by the general membership. Today, the times call for more active engagement in institutional stewardship and direct involvement in adapting and modernizing the Foreign Service to meet the opportunities and demands of the 21st century. Diplomacy and the voice of the Foreign Service are more important than ever. A decade ago, in introducing AFSA to Secretary John Kerry, I described AFSA's mission as promoting a strong, effective, professional Foreign Service to serve as the institutional backbone of American diplomatic capacity. I identified then 4 priority issues: the diplomacy, security balance, and effective risk management, professional education and training, tangible recognition for the Foreign Service itself, and institutional reform and restructuring to ensure a Department of State and a Foreign Service capable of sustained complex diplomacy. These issues remain current. To address them effectively requires not only experience and knowledge, but also wisdom, trust, and unity of purpose. I look forward to continuing to support AFSA and its mission of supporting the Foreign Service in whatever ways I can, including by capturing, preserving, and sharing the experiences of America's diplomats through ADST's Foreign Affairs Oral History Program. And I'd like to invite any of those here who are not yet fully retired to consider doing your oral history if you have not. And that applies to those active duty who are far from retirement, but keep it in mind because it's a valuable and unique collection and legacy of modern American diplomacy and the Foreign Service's role in it. I look forward to making common cause with all of you, and I'm so impressed and warmed and heartened by hearing the inspiring stories of awardees today and at all these AFSA Awards ceremonies. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Susan, and congratulations. Now I have the honor of presenting a Special Achievement Award to AFSA's General Counsel, Sharon Papp. Over the past 30 years, Ms. Papp has made innumerable contributions to AFSA, its constituencies, and the whole of the Foreign Service community. Each year, her team assists over 600 members who are filing grievances, being investigated, being proposed for discipline, involved in OCR, equal employment opportunity complaints, or just needing advice and assistance. And she, throughout her 3 decades of service to AFSA and the Foreign Service, has provided invaluable support on a range of policy issues related to conditions of employment and AFSA's rights as a federal labor union. For example, in the 1990s, Ms. Papp worked to end discrimination in the Foreign Service agencies based on sexual orientation and secured a ruling from the Foreign Service Grievance Board that the State Department had violated its own regulations in appointing a civil service employee as DCM. More recently, she helped create a legal mechanism under which 12 AFSA members who were called to testify in the Trump impeachment process were allowed to be represented by private counsel, also to allow us to raise money for their legal defense, and to allow them to accept pro bono legal representation, all changes to federal ethics rules. Sharon's contributions to AFSA and to all of us in the Foreign Service are truly legendary, hard to sum up in a few words, but I will just say that we at AFSA feel incredibly lucky that she has devoted so many years to supporting us, to supporting our colleagues in the Foreign Service, to supporting our members. So Sharon, thank you, and please come up. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you, Eric, for that lovely introduction, and to John Nayland and to Ken Caro-Mentz for the nomination. and the entire AFSA Governing Board for recognizing my contributions for the last 30 years with this Special Achievement Award. It's an honor to be recognized with such an outstanding group of Foreign Service employees. It has been a privilege to work with 15 governing boards, my AFSA colleagues, and of course the thousands of talented Foreign Service employees I have assisted over the years. And Eric, it's more like 1,000 people we help a year, not 600. We have a staff of 11 attorneys and grievance counselors now. When I started, I think we had only 4 people. So we've really grown along with the Foreign Service. I'd like to give a special shout out to my awesome labor management colleagues who I'm going to list in the order that we've worked together. A lot of us have worked 20 years together, 30 years together, so if you combine all our service, it probably adds up to about 130 years of dedication to AFSA. I'd like to shout out to Colleen, James, Latana, Nira, Patrick, Rika, Heather, Sue, Ben, and Brianna, and all of my colleagues over at AFSA headquarters. It is such a pleasure to work with all of you, and I really appreciate all of your support. I'd also like to give a big thank you to my husband, Rick, who's over there, and my daughters, Nicole and Andrea, and my 91-year-old mother, Lillian, for all of their love and support. I've always been a very strong believer in due process and fairness. And in this job, I've really enjoyed helping people try to get those things. Sometimes agencies take actions that are either unwarranted or overly harsh, or they violate the union's rights or a collective bargaining agreement. And I feel very strongly about that and will do all I can to make that right. And my colleagues in the Labor Management Office feel the same way. One of the things I like the most about my job is just meeting such wonderful, smart people, being able to help them, and not having to charge them. Few lawyers can say they love what they do. I am very fortunate to be one of those who has loved her job for over 30 years. Thank you so much for recognizing my contributions.
Thank you, Sharon. And now we have an award for our Post Representative of the Year. The winner this year is Jeff Osweiler, but he is unable to join us today. We accept this award on his behalf, and he's asked that you read his award citation in the program. And want to congratulate Jeff and thank him for his work as AFSA Post Representative. Next, our final performance award. It is a privilege and an honor to welcome Dr. Sushma Palmer to honor the recipients of the Mark Palmer Award for the Advancement of Democracy. And someone who worked with Mark, with Ambassador Palmer, this is always a particular pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to welcome Dr. Palmer back to our AFSA award ceremony. It has been too long. So, Dr. Palmer, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Ambassador Rubin, thank you so much, and good afternoon. I want to thank the American Foreign Service Association for hosting this award and for setting it up in the first place. It's a pleasure to present the Mark Palmer Award for the Advancement of Democracy. We established the award in 2015 in honor of my late husband, Mark Palmer, Ambassador Palmer, and his lifelong passion for promoting democracy and human rights. The award recognizes members of the foreign services who embody bold and creative achievement and demonstrate imaginative, determined, and effective means to advance democracy and expand freedom in closed societies. This year's Palmer Award is shared by 2 distinguished diplomats from among many outstanding candidates reviewed by our panel. And I'm pleased to see both of them here. I thought that one of them wasn't, but I'm glad that both of them are here, which is wonderful. The first is Jacob Surface of Embassy Baghdad for his extraordinary leadership in collaborating with the UN and the EU election monitors and implementing US policy to ensure free and fair elections in Iraq. The election produced independent members of parliament, promised to deliver governance reforms, responsive public services, and justice for activists and human rights defenders. The aim of the winners was to form Iraq's first majority government that would be capable of advancing Iraq's slow march towards democracy. Well, fingers crossed. Jacob, it's my honor to present you the 2022 Mark Palmer Award for the Advancement of Democracy. Please come up. Don't drop it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Palmer, and to Ambassador Mark Palmer as well. And thank you to the photographer who kindly took his time to ensure that my ugly face doesn't look too terrible for your magazine. I apologize for missing the group photo earlier. I was actually up in the office of Spec John Kerry working out some issues with COVID and the upcoming climate change conference in Egypt. So thank you all for this incredible honor. My passion for democracy and human rights actually comes from the investments that the State Department has made in me. I grew up on a Christmas tree farm in West Central Indiana, where without the intervention of the Pickering Fellowship, I would have become a very determined and effective insurance salesman, which is nothing to say that there's anything wrong with selling insurance. It's an honorable profession, but it was truly life-changing to be welcomed here in Washington by a panel of diplomats and ambassadors retired who interviewed me and asked me my intentions if I was granted this incredible opportunity. And I promised them that my intention was to honor the commitment of my friends and family who had gone off to serve in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, some of the worst periods of those crises in 2005 and 2007. And so I did some rough calculations on the back of the Hotel Marriott card here. I never let a political officer do math, but I've determined that over the last about 10 years of my career, I've spent about 44% hardship average across each post. So to those of you who selected me for the Pickering, I hope that investment has paid off for you. I'm truly humbled to be up here today, especially because we have multiple colleagues in the room who have either served or are receiving awards for Embassy Kabul. And in 2018 and 2019, I was actually there working on the peace effort. And in the quiet moments when I'm back amongst my Christmas trees in Indiana, I can still hear the gunshots and bombs that killed 48 women and children when the Taliban accidentally overran the wrong building. Cowardice has many forms, but courage looks like this. It does get better. Hang in there. Elections integrity in the democratic process is under challenge around the world, not only in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and Brazil, but right here at home. I'm the product of what democracy and freedom of opportunity can look like. And for that reason, I have a message for those of you very senior individuals here today. Our generation's legacy, my generation's in the Department of State, is probably going to be defined by what we do to halt the counterwave against democracy that's happening in the world right now. And I'd like to say that after months and months and months of fighting to get election monitors and the appropriate level of assistance to honor the sacrifice of over 850 martyrs, Iraqi youth, calling for the kinds of opportunity and democracy that I was granted here in the United States, that our policy is better when it stands on the side of those who are making those sacrifices in the streets and calling for a better life. Our messages are better received, our investments are more impactful. So I hope that for you here today, at the apex and the beginning of your careers, that you'll help ensure that our enlightened self-interest continues to be on the right side of history. Because there's millions more young men and women out there like me, frustrated, young, 16, 22-year-old Jacob, looking for the kinds of mentorship and opportunities that were granted to me through the Pickering Fellowship and through the mentorship of several people here in this room today. That's all I have to say, other than to recognize the truly distinguished guests who flew all the way from Indiana to be here today, representing my family, my mother Julie and her partner Marlon, who you will have the opportunity to convince of the importance of the investments in our diplomacy worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Wonderful to have you here. Our second recipient today, this year, is Regine Stokes. As Belarus desk officer from 2020 to 2022, Ms. Stokes led U.S. support for democratic institutions and the opposition leader, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. She used public diplomacy to deliver a strong and clear message, clear response to egregious human rights violations. Her approach was to use creative diplomatic engagement in support of civil society groups within Belarus and the opposition forces outside the country. Ms. Stokes' efforts formed a strong and significant underpinning for strengthening Belarus's nascent democracy and combating authoritarianism under the Lukashenko regime. Regine, it's my great pleasure to present to you the 2022 Mark Palmer Award for the Advancement of Democracy. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for this award. This is really a huge honor. In addition to AFSA and the Palmer family, I want to thank first and foremost my colleagues in EUR, some of whom are here today, particularly the Office of Eastern European Affairs. I'm only here right now because of all of your support, encouragement, and collegiality. A special thank you to Anne Coleman-Hahn for nominating me, and not just me, actually. And for recognizing my work amongst so much other really amazing talent, not just in our office, but in this entire department. I'm very proud of how the US responded to the crisis in Belarus in 2020, how we rallied the support of our allies and partners at a time when the transatlantic relationship was a bit frayed. Some of the work we did in late 2020 laid the groundwork with our allies for the revitalized relationship that would follow, and that would be so vitally important right now. I'm also proud of how my tiny but mighty team mobilized to keep this building's hunger for information sated, standing up the Belarus Action Team and creating the Belarus Information Node, lovingly known as the BAT and the BIN, to streamline information sharing, and all of this during peak COVID. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank my family. I'm thrilled that my parents are here today from Connecticut, Kyle and Brian Spears. But the biggest thanks go to my husband, fellow FSO Nick Stokes, who spent months upon months as the de facto shadow Belarus desk officer, listening in on all of my Zoom calls from across the kitchen table whenever we were able to telework. We're going to be sharing this award on a very well-earned vacation later on this year. The people of Belarus will no doubt be continuing their struggle for democracy for years to come. But I know that our continued support to the political opposition and exiled members of civil society is having a real important impact on Belarus's future, particularly as they work to solve the dual crisis of Belarus's enablement of Russia's war in Ukraine. It was an honor to be part of what we were able to do from 2020 into 2022, and I remain very hopeful for the future, not just for them, but for us. Thank you so much. Živě Belarus.
Thank you, Regine, and congratulations, and thank you, Dr. Palmer. Last but not least, and definitely not least, we have our Constructive Dissent Awards, which is a part of AFSA's heritage and something that so many of us feel very, very strongly about. For over 50 years, AFSA has encouraged the Foreign Service community to uphold the important tradition of constructive dissent by exhibiting the courage to challenge the system, to challenge conventional wisdom, to make suggestions about how our country might pursue better policy. As a former recipient myself of the William R. Rifkin Award, I believe fervently in the vitality and importance of dissent and taking a stand constructively. And I'm also very proud to be part of supporting this program and working with department leadership now and the policy planning staff to expand and enhance and enrich it. It is unique, to my knowledge, within the entire U.S. government. It's something that we can all be very proud of. So I'm very pleased to have the honor of introducing first the winner of the W. Averell Harriman Award for Constructive Dissent by an entry-level Foreign Service officer. This year, our recipient is Michael White. During his time as a first tour consular officer in Hermosillo, Mexico, Michael highlighted the vulnerabilities within Mission Mexico's visa policy and adjudication standards. He noted that the Foreign Affairs Manual and the mission did not offer officers support or guidance on the TN visa program, nor did it require applicants to be informed of their labor rights. We're talking about temporary workers in the United States. Mr. White tirelessly advocated for worker protection and policy change, and ultimately his dissent cable led to critical changes in the visa program that not only promote the department's priority of safe and legal travel to the United States, but also protects the human and workers' rights of the individuals. This is quite an impressive accomplishment on our first tour. Michael, would you please join us here today to receive the award and say a few words? Thank you. Great, thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rubin, for that kind introduction. I don't want to talk about TN visas today. For everyone that knows me, if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop, and it's really niche and complex, so I want to focus on what's most important. And first and foremost, I must say that I could not have done this alone. Along every step of the way, I had help from my friends and colleagues. For every word of caution and discouragement, my friends and colleagues were there to support and encourage me. Many of my fellow adjudicators in Mexico helped me. We worked on this issue together. However, no one else was more involved than my tandem spouse, Adriana, who I'm so glad could be here with me today. Both of our first tour assignments as consular officers in Hermosillo, Mexico, overlapped for 10 months, and during that time, we were working on TN visa issues together. If it were not for her support, both at home and in the office, I would not be standing here today. So thank you so much, Adriana. Honestly, when I joined the Foreign Service almost 4 years ago today, I'd never imagined that I could ever be standing here and being recognized for something like this. When I arrived in Hermosillo to start my first tour, I could never have imagined standing here. And when I pressed send on my dissent channel cable, I just never imagined that I could be standing here. However, because of this award, this unique award, there is a culture of constructive dissent in the State Department. And even though I could never imagine this moment, I knew about the dissent channel and its uses. And I knew about AFSA's Constructive Dissent Award. And I knew about the winners that had come before me. And so on some level, even though I was an untenured first tour officer, I knew that it was okay for me to press on. I was told many times, no, this is above your pay grade. I was told this is not how things are done in the department. I was told, we will get to this later. I was told this is a bad news story, and nobody wants to hear a bad news story. I was basically told everything except you were wrong about TN visas. In other words, I was just lucky enough to have stumbled onto something that I just happened to be right about. But because of this critical culture of constructive dissent, I knew somehow it was safe for me to keep going, and so I did. And if it were not for the previous winners that have come before me and their inspiring stories to work and create this culture, something would have been different, and I might not have been able to keep going. So to me, this is why this recognition is so incredibly important, that by standing here today, together, all of us, we might inspire a future Foreign Service officer to keep going. So thank you, AFSA, and thank you, SP, and thank you to everyone who has supported this critical culture of constructive dissent in the State Department. Thank you.
Actually, yeah, let me just... Great, thank you. And just a couple of brief words. I wanted to say two things because Michael referenced it. I want to thank and salute Secretary Blinken and the department leadership, including Policy Planning Director Salman Ahmed, for their commitment to strengthening, reviving, and expanding the programs that make constructive dissent possible, including the Dissent Channel. And the fact that the Secretary reads every message personally is very meaningful and very important, and we are very much appreciative of that. Also, the upcoming plans to revive the Secretary's open forum, which has been dormant for way too long, is very positive. I did want to just say a word to Ambassador Negroponte for his role personally back in the days when the Dissent Channel was being created at a very difficult time during the Vietnam War, in helping, along with other members of his generation in the Foreign Service, for giving us this very important part of our culture that really serves our country. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to move on to the next award. Early in my career, I was honored to be a recipient of the Rifkin Award for Mid-Level Dissent. That was in 1994 as part of our group dissent on Bosnia policy and the breakup of Yugoslavia. And so the Rifkin Award means a lot to me personally, and it is therefore with particular pleasure that I introduce Ambassador Charlie Rifkin to present the William R. Rifkin Award for Constructive Dissent by a Mid-Level Foreign Service Officer. The Rifkin family and Charlie personally have been very strong supporters of AFSA, the Foreign Service, and the concept, the importance of constructive dissent in successful policymaking. So we're deeply grateful for the Rifkin family support for AFSA and this award over many decades. Charlie, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Eric, for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it. It is wonderful for me to have the chance to be back here at the State Department after so many years and in person. Having had the privilege of serving as both a U.S. ambassador and as an Assistant Secretary of State, it is really fun for me to have a chance to see so many friends and former colleagues here in the audience today. Because during my 8 years at the State Department, I had the chance to work with some of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life, civil service and foreign service officers who sometimes work in anonymity, often at hardship posts, as we just heard, and at risk to their own lives because they believe in this country and they understand America's indispensable role in the world. And that dedication is what the William R. Rifkin Award is all about. The award was named for my father, William R. Rifkin, who died abroad while serving as the U.S. ambassador to Senegal and the Gambia. And the award was created by my mother, Enid Long, with the help of my godfather, then Vice President Hubert Humphrey. And the honor has been given every year since it was created in 1968 to a mid-level Foreign Service officer who's exhibited initiative, integrity, intellectual courage, and constructive dissent. And many recipients have gone on to serve at the highest level of our Foreign Service. Look no further than Ambassador Rubin himself and Ambassador Boyott here in the front row, also a recipient. And I want to say that a quote that Dwight D. Eisenhower once said, Here in America, Eisenhower said, we're descended in blood and in spirit from revolutionists and rebels, men and women who dare to dissent from accepted doctrine. Well, the spirit of dissent is encrypted in our American DNA. But as the three co-recipients of this year's Rivkin Award demonstrated, dissent, when used respectfully and shared through constructive channels, can lead to extremely positive results. The Rivkin Award, by the way, had numerous nominations this year, and two of them actually they were tied for first place in the award voting. So I'll present both of those awards this afternoon. The first William Rivkin Award winner goes to Jennifer L. Davis. Now, I gotta say that the Rivkin Award, in my history with this award, we usually receive one nomination for each candidate, but Jen received 9 nominations, 9, I kid you not, for her dissent. And they came from her peers, her colleagues, her subordinates, and senior state officials, including ambassadors. As the U.S. Consul General in Istanbul, Turkey, Jen's tenure there coincided with terrorist attacks that killed U.S. citizens, as well as specific and credible threats against the mission and against Jen herself. There was a constant stream of disinformation about the U.S. mission and its activities. It was against that backdrop that the then Chargé in Ankara asked Jen to do a media interview with a Turkish journalist to correct the journalist's inaccurate reporting and misinformation about the U.S. strategy to obtain the release of locally engaged staff who had been unjustly arrested. So 18 months later, when she was working at her onward assignment here at Maine State, Jennifer was stunned to discover that she was the subject of a 3-year diplomatic security investigation concerning that interview. And it resulted in the revocation of her security clearance and came with a proposal of disciplinary action against her. Now, details of this case were leaked to the press, and some of you may have seen that, possibly tarnishing her reputation and ignoring key facts before she was even permitted to speak up and provide information and evidence in her own defense. As one nominator said, who is an ambassador, this nominator said, although the department was not standing with Jennifer, she stood with the department. She chose to take a constructive approach to the problem and use the dissent channel to outline fundamental flaws in the department's investigatory and discipline process. She made helpful recommendations about how the State Department could improve their investigative process to spare future Foreign Service and civil service officers from going through the same ordeal that Jen endured herself. For this incredibly courageous response to an unjust predicament, I am proud to present on behalf of the Rivkin family this year's William Rivkin Award to Jennifer L. Davis.
Whew. Thank you. Thank you all. It is such an honor to be with you today. That this award was named after your family, Ambassador Rivkin, makes it an even greater honor. Ambassador Rivkin was in Paris when I was working with Secretary Kerry, and I'm afraid we darkened his door more than he probably would have wanted. But he was always such a gracious host to us. And I also want to thank AFSA, Ambassador Rubin and Sharon. Your indefatigable support for me meant everything to me. Thank you. And to be with all of you today is extraordinary, to listen to your stories. So I'm so honored to be included among you. I'm not going to cry. As a recovering lawyer and as a Foreign Service officer, I have always been so moved by the tradition of dissent in our government. I think it is the hallmark and the defining feature of our government that we can criticize it and do so with a heart that wants to see positive change, which was certainly what was in my heart. And I think about all the courageous people who've received these awards who have said really hard and important truths and had those truths heard and had systems improved because of that courage. And to be among them is truly an extraordinary honor. I, of course, would not have chosen the underlying reason for being here. I would tell you that the relationships that we had during a very hard time in Turkey were extraordinary, and the locally employed staff that we were defending who were wrongly detained. I hope you've heard today what our locally employed staff do and how often they put themselves in harm's way for us. So to stand up for them, to defend them, to speak about the United States and how we will stand with our people was very important to me, and I thought very important for the department. And I want to note that one of those colleagues, Metin Topuz, is still in a jail in Turkey because of his 30 years of service to our country. And I received this award in his honor as well. Sorry. The reforms that I suggested to our systems, I think are very basic ones, and I'll just share a few of them. One is that these cases can't go on for years. Not only does that violate due process in that memories fade and emails go away, but it also puts employees through a terrible turmoil. I also suggested that we give employees the opportunity to be heard first before a decision is made, so that the department can benefit from hearing the facts of the case before making a decision, and then the employee is not placed in the position of having to fight a decision that's already been made and the bureaucratic inertia that goes along in defending a decision that's already been made. And I also suggested that the people involved in our systems take unconscious bias training. And I think, as my dear friend, Masha, Ambassador Yovanovitch, who's here today, and it's such an honor, has said, I'm sorry. She helped me see all the ways that women have been affected, and the way that she conducted herself with such grace was a powerful example to me and every woman Foreign Service officer. So I tried to always conduct myself as she would have told me to. She told me to speak my truth. Whew, sorry. But I think unconscious bias training is important because it helps sort of do away with what we might think a young woman would be responsible for in one of our largest consulates. If I could stop crying, I also want to thank the world's best father, Nick Harris, who's also a fellow diplomat, and my husband, and our children who supported me throughout. I would like to thank the collection of yayas, my ambassadors who I've always looked up to, and my sisters who have supported me and nominated me. I'm looking across the room and I'm seeing so many of them, and my heart is so full to have you here. A professional woman, we have to have a sisterhood of people who will stand by us and support us and tell us when we're not doing well and tell us when we're doing well. And I'm so grateful for this power of the sisterhood that has always surrounded me in my career. I want to thank a dear friend of mine, Jean Manas, who helped me with putting steel in my spine and wisest of counsel throughout this. I want to thank my friend Abby, who I am reliably informed I should refer to as Congresswoman Spanberger, who has sat with us here today, who supported me throughout. Okay, and this is the part where I'm really going to cry. I want to thank Ambassador Thomas Greenfield. And she told me I didn't bring a Kleenex, and she's absolutely right. But you taught me throughout this what leadership is. You stood by me. Your moral compass always points true north. And to have you support me was everything to me. So thank you. And finally, my mother. My mother is here. And my mother is a steel magnolia of the most beautiful southern kind. And my mother taught me growing up that all you ever have to be is right and polite. And she said it in a beautiful southern accent, right and polite. And she taught my sister and I from a very young age that we needed to speak our truths and stand our ground, and demonstrated that throughout my life. And I have tried to model my life after hers. So it is an extraordinary honor that she is here with me today. Forgive me for crying, but it was a difficult situation to have gone through, but to have the love and support of so many incredible people throughout this, and to have had them encourage me to stand my ground and speak my truth meant the world to me. So I'm so honored, and thank you so much for this award.
Thank you, Jennifer. And now I'd like to introduce the other winner, because there are two winners of the William Rifkin Award, and this award goes to Elizabeth Zentos and Anton Cooper. Now, stationed in Embassy Kabul's political section during 2020 and 2021, Liz and Anton watched with grave concern as the prospect of U.S. troop withdrawal and continued negotiations with the Taliban threatened to bring the Afghan state to a crushing halt. They worried that if the situation spiraled out of control, the embassy's locally engaged staff and other key contacts were going to be particularly exposed. Concerned that this precarious situation was not being accurately communicated to Washington's leadership, Liz and Anton chose to use the dissent channel for a cable that clearly articulated the likelihood of quick deterioration of the security situation in Kabul and the need to plan for early evacuation efforts. Now, this view ran counter to many senior decision makers here at State, but 24 of their colleagues at Embassy Kabul believed that Elizabeth and Anton were correct, and they signed on to the cable as well, urging the State Department to begin registering in advance all Afghans who qualified for SIVs, as well as other proactive measures. The cable underscored how our foreign service officers are the eyes and the ears of our country's national security apparatus, and that their on-the-ground insights are invaluable in informing policymakers' decisions. Now, it's worth noting that although the media got wind of this cable's existence as well, the text of the cable was never leaked. In fact, one of the nominations mentioned in the nomination that he has never even seen the text himself. So, for their determined and creative actions that turned out to be prescient, I am proud to present the William Rifkin Award to Elizabeth Zentos and Anton Cooper. Now, Anton couldn't be with us today, so Elizabeth's going to accept the award for both of them on their behalf. Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth Zentos.
Great.
Wow, it's heavy. Well, it's really, really an honor to be here today. But I want to start by noting that this award should not be for just Anton and me. It should really be for all of our colleagues from Embassy Kabul, who Christy described so well, our team in Kabul there. As Ambassador Rifkin noted, 24 people signed on to this cable. And those colleagues of mine not only signed on, but contributed to the cable. And we were a team out there in Kabul working together, all of us doing what we thought was best at the time. So as some of these colleagues are here today who signed on to the cable, and we're a big part of it, so huge, huge congrats to them as well for this award. Also, our interagency colleagues who were in Kabul with us played a really large role in this. They coordinated with us day in and day out. So this award really belongs to them also, and most importantly, our Afghan colleagues. More than anyone, this award belongs to them. They taught me anything I pretended to know about Afghanistan, and they are the ones who really risked everything to fight for what they believed in. In addition to these colleagues from Kabul, I want to thank some additional people. So first, Anton Cooper. If only he could be here with his big bushy beard, and he would have a lot to say, but you know, anyone who knows Anton knows he makes you think. He doesn't just go through the motions, he cares, and he's committed to working for what he believes is right. And the fact that he's in Kyiv, Ukraine today, instead of here, shows that he continues to do this. I'd also like to thank my parents who are here, Nick and Wendy. My dad, who's 85, not quite the 91, but still, you know, my parents have always stood up for what they believed in and taught me from an early age the importance of fighting for what you think is right and those who need defending. And so they instilled in me a sense of duty that I continue to think about today. I'd also like to thank my husband, Alex, who I just married a week ago. Yes. Alex was my support system throughout my time in Kabul. He had served in the Georgian military in Afghanistan twice, so he understood what was happening in Afghanistan very well, and he urged me to write down all of the thoughts that I was sharing with him. So it's really thanks to him that I wrote down those thoughts. I'd like to also thank my two constant mentors who are here today, Scott Ballard and Sasha Kasanov. Throughout my career, Scott and Sasha have supported me through thick and thin. They've given me advice throughout, and they've really kept me going. Everyone here knows how important mentors are, and so thank you. Huge shout out to Ann Coleman Hahn once again, who was one of the folks who nominated me for this award and who has taught me so much as a fellow deputy who works in the office next to mine, and especially has taught me about the importance of recognizing service, which I've really taken to heart. I want to thank Ben Dill, who also nominated me. And last in thanks, I want to thank Ambassador Rifkin. I want to thank Ambassador Rubin and the entire AFSA team. I echo what those before me have said about the importance of this award. I have to admit I was a little hesitant even to accept it. It seemed like accepting an award for such a tragic situation. Maybe it felt a little awkward, but folks at AFSA reminded me that this is more than just an award for me. The existence of this award is so important for the Foreign Service. And so thank you to everyone who keeps this award going. Lastly, I just want to close by saying that I hope we'll all remember the importance of not only recognizing dissent after the fact, but keeping it in mind and listening to it during a crisis as it's ongoing. So I went from Kabul to the Russia desk. Perhaps a poor choice, but it really has been inspiring to see some of the lessons learned from Afghanistan applied now to Russia, Ukraine. We have a Tiger team. I suspect that was a direct result of what happened with Afghanistan. There's definitely been a desire to think about what's going to happen with Embassy Kyiv, which Anne thinks about every day, what's going to happen even with Embassy Moscow. And so as we continue through the Russia-Ukraine crisis, continue through Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, and as we all deal with future crises, I hope we all just remember the importance of listening to dissenting views, of encouraging folks, even working level, to speak their minds, and that we continue to make dissent a really important part of our department. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. Congratulations. Thank you, Ambassador Rifkin. congratulations to all of our winners. We have two more very important awards, and I appreciate everybody sticking with us. It's our first award ceremony in 3 years, so there's a lot of people to recognize, and I think probably all of us are finding the stories that they're telling just incredible. So it makes me proud to do what we do in some of the most difficult circumstances in the world. We have one more award recognizing the performance of our people under fire in Kabul. This is the Christian Herder Award, named for the former Secretary of State, for constructive dissent by a senior Foreign Service officer. And this year, the winner is Benjamin Dill, who, as management counselor in Embassy Kabul through the COVID-19 pandemic and the fall of Kabul, challenged the State Department's decision to send COVID vaccines only for American staff. He acted with initiative and dedication to quickly approve the purchase of vaccines for all members of the mission, all employees of the mission, and ensure that the first doses were administered as soon as possible. He also critically advocated for more management staff to remain in Kabul to support our evacuation efforts. And his performance, not only in ensuring that our people were protected, both our American and local staff, but also that we had the team we needed to get through the evacuation, has earned him this award. So let me welcome Ben and say, please come up forward.
Well, thank you for your kind words, Ambassador Rubin, and I appreciate the recognition. But I must highlight that the larger Kabul management team deserves credit for this recognition because of their ideas, work, earnestness, tenaciousness that got us through the most difficult challenges I've witnessed in my Foreign Service career. As a management officer, I've set up many ceremonies like this, though not with such august participants and eloquent speakers. I do understand, though, the need to be brief, and let's see how I do. I thank Kabul Assistant Chief of Mission Scott Weinhold for supporting keeping Embassy Air open through the evacuation of the compound. I also want to thank the front office for supporting our COVID-19 mitigation policies that kept us safe. Some later expanded across the U.S. government. I appreciate Embassy Air's advocacy of hanging on to those old CH-46 helicopters, which we used to the end, and we were able to pull out our brand new Blackhawks, saving tens of millions of dollars. And I would like to single out Dwayne Stewart for his strong advocacy of keeping Embassy Air into August, despite pressure to reduce the management footprint. And that enabled the movement of 2,500 diplomatic staff to the airport in a day. Many in management and other Kabul offices had contributions vital to keeping us safe from COVID and, more importantly, preparing and carrying out the evacuation. I mean, there are too many names to list, but I will attempt some. I appreciate Miguel and Maureen Danzit, Hildy and Dan Pearson, Mike and Berta Eidinger, Jaime Scarpati, Elaine Benedict, Sarah Van, Richard Johns, Emmanuel Waugh, Christy Peterson, Holly Pellas, and many others in the management section. Christy, I will note that I think all of us have shed some tears during and after the evacuation, mainly for our local colleagues who, some of whom remain, some of the contractors remain. We were able to get all the LE, or others were able to get all LE staff out by the end of August. I want to give special thanks to Kabul's GSO Health Unit, HR, Finance, CLO, Facilities, Management, OMSs, IRM, contractors, and many embassy volunteers from management and other offices who helped obtain and administer 14,000 vaccine doses and who kept us safe by establishing separate workspace and ensuring protocols that kept separate those who were unvaccinated, which were key to keeping us safe in a place where medical resources were austere, to say the least. I appreciate all who worked through the evacuation, especially RSO and consular staff and some outside management help, especially Patrick Merrill, who's here, who came to Kabul twice to help us, but most significantly during the time at the airport. And I am especially grateful for those who got out our local staff and their families. I think those of us who have served in the Foreign Service would agree that our local staff are often the unsung heroes of the Foreign Service because they're working sometimes for a government that is not popular in their own country, or in the case of Afghanistan, for a government that puts them at risk for working for us. So I think that we do owe them continued support, and I know many of us continue to write letters, employment letters, and a year later we're still doing work on their behalf. I know that we who served in Kabul appreciated the many, many people in DOD and in the department who supported Kabul and its challenges over that last year. I especially appreciate my family, my wife Anna and kids, for supporting my presence in Kabul. And I want to express appreciation to my parents, my mother, 98, unable to attend. My father has passed on, as well as to my sisters who supported this zany career choice. Finally, I would note there's been much talk about the role of the Dissent Awards and the dissent process. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the State Department is the only federal agency that has such a program that formally recognizes dissent. And in the case of the department, that endorses AFSA's work in recognizing dissent. So thank you again, Ambassador Rubin, and thanks to AFSA for this recognition, and more importantly for its overall efforts on behalf of the Foreign Service, really as our only and our collective voice in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and congratulations. And let me just say, we've heard so many incredible stories today, and there's so many more out there we all know. But I did just want to say a word on behalf of all of us at AFSA, all of us in the Foreign Service, to our colleagues who managed the evacuation in Kabul and saw us through some of the most difficult times we've had in our recent history with tremendous courage and dedication and commitment. I just want to salute you all. And it's not an accident that we're recognizing so many people who were part of that. So thank you on behalf of all of us. Thank you. Okay, last but not least, our final award of the day is the F. Allen Tex Harris Award for Constructive Dissent by a Foreign Service Specialist. This year, I have the honor of presenting this award to Stephen May of the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. Over the past 5 years, serving in the DS Criminal Investigative Liaison Branch, Special Agent Stephen May has shown initiative, dedication, and courage in improving the department's policies on the implementation of the International Megan's Law, the IML, which aims to protect children around the world from sexual exploitation. Mr. May has tirelessly worked within the system to highlight concerns regarding the department's responsibility to put notices in the passports of registered sex offenders with convictions against children. After submitting a formal dissent cable, the department commended Mr. May, without whom the passport application process might not have been improved, to more effectively combat international sexual exploitation and trafficking. So to put it simply, his dissent made the difference that got the process changed. So it is a great pleasure to award the Tex Harris Award in honor of one of our great AFSA presidents, to Special Agent Stephen May. And I'd like to invite him up to the podium.
Ambassador.
Thank you. As a Texan myself, I like to think this is the saving the best for last. Although, you know, it is a great honor to share this stage with all of you. I do feel my award is a little bit underwhelming, you know, trying to change government form rather than than everything else. You know, Baghdad, Kabul, all of the dangers we face out there. I want to thank my family, my wife and my son, who sacrificed so much time with me. And, you know, I'm glad to see the EFM Awards, because that is such a big part of our life overseas, having our family members out there and their support of us. You know, my colleagues in DS, I don't see many here today. I think we're still a little leery in DS of dissent awards, and it seems still a bit like a trap for us that we're going to get in trouble for speaking truth to power. So hopefully, you know, we can keep getting a few more of these through the years. I want to thank our interagency partners who brought this issue to my attention, read my draft, my emails, my cable, everything else. U.S. Marshals Service National Sex Offender Targeting Center, as well as the DHS Angel Watch Center that works on international Megan's Law. We have DS agents embedded also with the FBI Crimes Against Children and Human Trafficking Center, our DOJ attorneys and more that worked on this issue. The Office of Overseas Schools, for anyone who doesn't know, there is a tremendous partnership with overseas schools and diplomatic security. A lot of us probably remember the Bill Vahey case, an international school teacher who probably, according to our colleagues at FBI, victimized about 1,000 children through the decades. He had been arrested at age 19 for a sexual offense against children, but still was in the international school system for years and years at many of the schools where our kids went. And that's the kind of where this partnership became you know, more relevant for a lot of us in DS and overseas schools. I want to thank Ambassador Richmond from JTIP, who helped on this previously and brought this to the attention of the National Security Council as well. And finally to AFSA. You know, I got to work with Ambassador Rubin years ago back in Moscow, and so the AFSA call about 2 years ago talking about dissent cables and encouraging people really encouraged me to put my email and the things I discussed within the department into a cable to formalize it. You know, and the policy and planning staff were excellent through the months in the response. When I joined the DS Criminal Investigative Branch, Liaison Branch in 2018, our DHS and U.S. Marshals partners brought to my attention that they had been trying for a couple of years to get a question on the passport application to ask applicants if they're a registered sex offender. This is specifically articulated in international Megan's Law. Congress said that we can do this, but we haven't. We unilaterally decided to not put the question on the passport application. And so, you know, trying to understand internally from the department, when I was going to these interagency meetings with the marshals and FBI and, you know, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and trying to explain why haven't we done this, and, you know, the answers I was getting from our, you know, my colleagues within the department, you know, why are we doing this? Someone might accidentally check the box. But, you know, we have that on visa applications and we can deal with it. Sex offenders would lie. One was, anyone honest enough to answer this question truthfully would tell us without us asking if they were a registered sex offender. That didn't work. There's not enough space on the form. We also got, you know, could we put it on the instruction page? It's already 4 pages long. Do we want a 5th page of instructions? And it's not that big of a problem. So how big is the problem? The U.S. Marshals Service National Sex Offender Targeting Center tracks 900,000 registered sex offenders in America. Their estimate is about 500,000 of those have convictions against children. So if checked, would be covered by international Megan's Law. I think most of us realize with international Megan's Law, we put the annotation in the back of the passport. That's one of the things we worked with overseas schools, and letting schools know, hey, perhaps you could look in the back of a passport to find out if someone is covered or not. But then when we realized in the first 3 years, we had found 5,000 out of 500,000 people. So there's only a 1% chance, if you looked in somebody's passport, that if they were recovered, that they would actually have the annotation in there. And so by not asking people in the first 3 years, we had 80 people self-declare that they were registered sex offenders. Angel Watch Center found another 5,000 on their own at DHS. So, as a result of putting these things together, the State Department has put now a notice on the website asking people to self-identify. So now we went from 25 self-declarations to 250. But that's still 10 drops in the bucket. If registered sex offenders have passports at the same rate that the average American citizen does, that's probably 200,000 people. Of those, 500,000 have passports. With a 10-year passport, we would expect about 20,000 a year to be renewing. And we went from 25 to 250 a year that we're finding. So absolutely, it's progress. I appreciate the nomination for this. I do think we need to keep doing more. I love the State Department. I love, our relationship with consular affairs, between diplomatic security and that partnership we have. And all my peers over here, I know we are better, that we can improve on this, that, yes, I haven't shared greatly, the official response to my dissent cable. It reassured me that, graphic design was not the primary reason for not doing this, but then went back in the same paragraph and mentioned graphic design again as a reason for not doing this. I think this is something that we can still work on, we can still improve. I definitely appreciate the pledge to do more by the department, and there is some suggestion of waiting until we go to the fully online applications to try this. I ask all of you to please, look at trying to implement this more quickly. If we can change it on the paper form, if we can make this mandatory, if we can do what Congress intended when they wrote that we could ask this question and then pass along any names of someone that checks the box to DHS Angel Watch to have them vetted whether or not they're covered by this law. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to Special Agent May for very important work. Okay, that is it for our awards. It's been a tremendous couple of hours, and I am deeply grateful to everyone for sticking with us and honoring our colleagues. The good news is, if you have a little more time, it's not over, because we are hosting a reception. And we're hosting it not in the Delegates Lounge across from this auditorium, which was my personal preference not to host it there, but actually in the National Museum of American Diplomacy space at the 21st Street entrance of the department. And we will have food and refreshments to honor our recipients. So if you can come by even for a few minutes, we're all going to walk over there. If you don't have a State Department badge, we will be helping with escorts through the building. We really hope you can join us, at least briefly, in the beautiful museum space on 21st Street. So with that, let me thank everyone who contributed, to our distinguished guests, to our award recipients. Congratulations, and thank you for everything you've done for all of us. To our team for helping to put this together, for the department's leadership in supporting not just this event, but constructive dissent and the principle of constructive dissent. And I just want to wish everybody a great evening. I hope I'll see you soon at 21st Street. If not, thank you for coming.